Chapter 18 Risk Management. Risk is the exposure to the possibility of loss, injury, or other adverse or unwelcome circumstance, or a chance or situation involving such possibility. Next, risk management. The risk management is used to refer to the procedure that help organization identify, understand, assess, and manage their risk, which will increase the likelihood of their success while minimizing the consequences of chances of failure. Next, advantages of risk management. The main objective of a successful risk management strategy are to detect and evaluate potential hazards. So either like this also they can ask in another way. The main objective of a successful risk management strategy are to detect and evaluate potential hazards. Comment. So answer is advantage of risk management. First, risk management always saves a large amount of money. First one, risk management always saves a large amount of money and reduces the need for firefighting. It creates solid contingency plans. So in first point only 3 points are there. It can aid in making plans and getting ready for chances that present themselves throughout a project or business. Next, strategic and corporate planning is enhanced by the risk management. By reducing legal action or avoiding breakages, it lowers the cost. Next, it establishes a greater dependability among the interested parties, resulting increased reputation. Reliable risk management procedures comfort significant stakeholders across the entire firm. So first is in long run, saves the large amount of money and reduces the need for firefighting, and it creates a solid contingency plan. Second, aid. Third, reputation. Fourth, lower the cost. And last, stakeholders across the firm will be comfort. Next, steps in the risk management process. Risk identification, analysis, assessment, and handling of risk. So first, risk identification. Next, risk analysis, risk assessment, handling of risk. Risk identification. It is the first stage of risk management strategy. It is the first stage. Risk managers will not be able to control the risk if they are unsuccessful in recognizing all potential losses or gains that pose a threat to the firm. Classifying organizational risk based on their various categories is the first responsibility of risk management. All potential project risk are detected is the goal of the risk identification process. So all project potential risk should be detected. That is the goal of this risk identification process. The ultimate goal of risk identification is to maximize the benefits of project possibilities while minimizing the negative effect of project setbacks and threat. And the goal of a risk management is to supply a data for the next stages of the risk management process. Process of risk identification. Creating a systematic process. Gathering information from various sources. Applying risk identification tools and techniques. Documenting the risk identification process. Assessing the process effectiveness. Means last evaluation. Next, risk analysis. This is second stage. This aids in the detection and management of prospective issues that could jeopardize important business efforts or project, means which impacts the business important efforts or projects. Next, risk analysis is useful in many situations, like means when risk analysis is suitable, when risk analysis will be helpful. Question may turn up in 3 possibilities. So first, risk analysis is useful in many situations like points, and when risk assessment is suitable, for 4 points. Next, risk assessment where it is helpful. First, while planning projects to help in the anticipating and neutralizing the possible problems. So to neutralize the possible problems. Next, while deciding whether or not to move forward with the project, Next, while improving safety and managing potential risk in the workplace. While preparing for events such as equipment or technology failure, theft, staff sickness, or natural disasters, means unforeseeable events. While planning for changes in environment such as new competitors coming into the market or changes to government policy. When all the permutation combinations of possible event threat are listed, while analyzing the risk parameters and the steps taken to manage such risk, the risk matrix is designed and popped out before the decision making and implementing the authority. Next, process of risk analysis. two processes. First, identify the threat, next, estimate the threat. In identifying the threat, there are possibility of arising risk from human, operational, reputational, procedural, project, financial, cultural, political and structural. So, political and structural, natural and operational, human and reputational, project and procedural, financial. Next, estimate the risk. After these threats have been identified, it is necessary to determine their likelihood of materializing as well as their potential impact on the business. So, making the best assessment of the likelihood that the event will occur and multiplying it by how much it will cost to get things back on the track are two methods of doing this. So, risk value is the product. Risk value is the product of event probability and event cost. Event probability and event cost. Process of risk assessment. First, develop the assessment criteria, assess the risk, assess risk interactions, prioritize the risk, response to risk, effective and sustainable risk assessment process. Develop assessment criteria, assess the risk, assess risk interaction, prioritize the risk, response to risk, effective and sustainable risk assessment process. Next, handling of risk. So, risk ownership should be distributed and the people handling risk need to have the responsibility and accountability allocated. Risk management options include the following. First, risk avoidance, risk retention or absorption. In this, again, there are further two active risk retention and passive risk retention. Active and passive. Active and passive. Next, risk reduction, risk transfer. There are three main ways to transfer the losses. First, by contract other than insurance or by insurance, contract of insurance. And the main method of risk transfer is insurance. So, first contract other than insurance and by contract of insurance. The main method is insurance. Next, risk mitigation. So, the action taken to reduce the negative impact referred to as risk mitigation. So, what is risk mitigation? Means practice of reducing or eliminating unacceptable risk associated with an organization activity is known as risk mitigation. So, risk mitigation stage entails creating plan for managing, removing, reducing risk to a manageable level. Once risks are identified and assessed, the strategy to manage the risk fall into one or more of the following categories. First, transfer the risk, risk retention or tolerate the risk, reduce the risk, avoid the risk, combine the risk or sharing the risk, and last is hedging the risk. Next, fraud risk management. Fraud is a deliberate action to deceive another person with the intention of gaining some things. So, fraud can be loosely defined as any behavior by which one person intends to gain a dishonest advantage over another. So, any behavior by which one person intends to gain a dishonest advantage over another. So, in other words, fraud is an act or omission which is intended to cause wrongful gain to one person. Next, need of fraud risk management. Organization's reputation could be damaged by fraud cases, and it may damage the public perception of their brand and also decline in the interest. Customer that lose faith in the company can eventually quit doing business with it. And companies and organizations run the risk of losing prospective new customers in addition to their current clients. So, fraud charges may cause businesses to lose clients due to reputational damage. Fraud risk management process. First, identify the risk, identifying the risk, assessing the risk, responding to risk, monitoring and reviewing the risk, reporting the risk. Identifying, assessing, responding, monitoring and reporting. Responsibility of risk management. In section 134.3 of the Companies Act provides that statement indicating development and implementation of a risk management policy for the company should be there. And according to SEBI LODR Regulation 2015, companies should lay down the procedure to inform the board members about the risk assessment and minimization processes. Board shall be responsible for framing, implementing and monitoring the risk management plan for the company. The risk management plan must include all the elements of the risk. And next, the risk management policy should reflect the company's risk profile and should clearly describe all elements of the risk management and internal control systems and internal audit function. Next, a company should have an identified chief risk officer. And according to Regulation 21 of SEBI LODR regulations, requires that every listed company should have a risk management committee. Role of CS in risk management. He has a significant role in assisting the board of organization to achieve its vision and strategy. The functions of the governance professional include: first, advice on best practices in governance, risk management, and compliance. Next, championing the compliance framework to safeguard organizational integrity, promoting and acting as a sounding board on standards of ethical and corporate behavior, balancing the interest of the board or governing body, management, and other stakeholders. First, advise the best practices, and next, to safeguard the organizational integrity and behavior, and last, stakeholders. And also, CS has to ensure that following questions are effectively addressed at the board level. What is the organization risk management philosophy? Is that philosophy clearly understood by all the personnel? What is the relationship among ERM, performance, and value? How is ERM integrated within organizational initiatives? What is the desired risk culture of the organization, and what points has to risk appetite been set? What strategic organization objectives have been set for the organization? What related operational objectives? What internal and external factors and events might positively or negatively impact? What is the organization level of risk tolerance? Is the chosen risk response appropriate for and in line with the risk tolerance level? Means for every sentence we have to add the question. Whatever till we have read in chapter 18, everything we can put here. Next, reputation risk. Reputation risk as the risk arising from negative perception on the part of the customers, counterparties, shareholders, investors, debt holders, market analysts, and other relevant parties or regulators that can adversely affect a bank's ability to maintain existing or establish a new business relationships and continued access to sources of funding. Normally, this risk do not usually have direct and immediate financial impact, but the consequences are very serious and later do have the significant financial impact. So, presently now it may be non-financial, but if neglected in future, it may lead to financial also. Loss of reputation has long-lasting damages like it destroys the brand value, steep downtrend in share value, ruined of strategic relationship, regulatory relationship is damaged, which leads to stringent norms, and recruitment to fetch qualified staff as well as the retention of the old employees becomes difficult. Reputation risk management. How we can manage? For managing the reputation risk, the following principles are worth noting. Means principles to be followed for managing the reputation risk. First, integration of risk while formulating business strategy. Means while formulating the strategy itself should integrate the risk. Next, effective board oversight, image building through effective communication, promoting compliance culture to have a good governance, persistently following up the corporate values, due care, interaction and feedback from stakeholders, strong internal check and control, peer review, quality report, newsletter publication, cultural alignments. Strategy, board oversight, communication, good governance, values, stakeholders, internal checks, quality report. Internal control is essential to the smooth operation and daily operations of a firm, and it helps the organization to accomplish its corporate goals. The range of internal control is extensive. So, control must not be viewed as a burden on business, but rather as a tool for maximizing business prospectus and minimizing the possible losses brought on by unfavorable circumstances. Next, scope of risk management and internal control means if risk It is a responsibility of each business to put in place risk management and internal control systems that are suitable for the circumstances. In a group, the parent company must make sure that each of its subsidiary has internal control and risk management procedures in place. Majorly, this is the important line. Risk management focuses on identifying threat and opportunities, while internal control counter the threat and take advantage of opportunity. So, the RM will focus on identifying the threat and opportunity, while internal control help to counter that threats and take the advantage of opportunity. Proper risk management and internal control assist the organization in making informed decision about the level of risk that they want to take and implement the necessary controls to effectively pursue their objectives. Next, successful organization integrate effective governance structures and processes with performance focused risk management and internal control at every level of the organization and across all the operations. Next, internal audit. It means an independent management function which involves a continuous and critical appraisal of the functioning of an entity with a view to suggest improvements thereto and add value to and strengthen the overall governance mechanism of the entity, including the entity's strategic risk management and internal control system. So, meaning of the internal audit in these keywords are: first, it is an independent management functions. It is used to strengthen the overall governance mechanism of the entity. Applicability of provision of internal audit. So, first, for every listed company and every unlisted public company having paid up share capital of 50 crore or more during preceding financial year and turnover of 200 crore or more during preceding financial year and outstanding loans borrowings from public financial institutions or banks exceeding 100 crore or more at any point of time during the preceding financial year. Outstanding deposits of 25 crore or more at any point of time during the preceding financial year. Next, every private company having turnover of 200 crore or more, outstanding loans or borrowings from banks or public financial institutions exceeding 100 crore or more at any point of the time during the preceding financial year. Next, importance of the internal audit. First, to increase the productivity, evaluate the risk and protect the assets, quality control, independent and unbiased insight, good corporate governance. Role of internal auditor in strengthening internal audit. So, internal auditor has to assess the operations of the internal control system and for making recommendations to improve it. Internal auditor helps to raise the awareness and train management personnel in internal control. And the question may turn up as: ensuring the success of an organization and bridging the gap between the board of directors and corporate management team is a key performance indicator. Comment. So, either like this or directly they can ask role of internal auditor in strengthening the internal audit. So, the specific responsibilities and duties of internal auditor is: first, evaluate the risk management activities, determine the organization's compliance with laws and regulations, evaluate and making the recommendations to improve the internal control, investigating fraud, offering an objective source of independent advice to reach the goal and achieve legality and validity, performing audit assignments, learning and studying the organization policy and guidelines, identifying audit scope, gathering, analyzing, evaluating and presenting accounting documentation, follow up the audit to monitor the management's intervention, promoting ethics and identifying the improper conduct within the company. Crisis management. Crisis management is an organization process and strategy based approach for identifying and responding to threat, an unanticipated event or any negative disruption with the potential to harm people, property or business processes, and dealing with the crisis in a way that limits the harm and helps the impacted business to recover speedily. Speedily means fast. Types of crisis, few of them have been listed below. First, natural, technological, organizational mistake, confrontational crisis and rumors. So, natural disaster, technological crisis, organizational mistake, confrontational crisis, rumors. Next, crisis management plan. Following guidelines are recommended for establishing a good crisis management plan. Question may turn up as: prerequisites for crisis management plans or essential of crisis management plan. So, first one is to identify an individual. Next, initiate frequent training and form a crisis team to work under the leadership of crisis manager. And when crisis occurs, this is the team that should be able to respond quickly. Next, planning the responses and crisis management process for various potential crises is highly recommended. It takes several approaches and processes to address the different crises. And initiate the systems that can effectively monitor or detect the foreseeable crisis and signals early enough in order to tackle the situation before it gets out of the hand. Next, provide a list of key persons in case of crisis and their contact information. Identify the ground person to be notified immediately when a crisis occurs. Identify a central point where employees can assemble and exit point to use in case of crisis. Regular testing of the crisis management process and emerging equipment and updating them frequently or as needed. Next, ESG risk assessment, environmental, social and governance. Significance of ESG risk assessment is enhanced sustainability, improved regulatory compliance, increased investment potential, better employee productivity and greater profitability. First, sustainability. Next, compliance. Both are related to governance. So, sustainability and compliance. Next, investment, money and employees and profit. ESG risk management involves 3 steps. First, identify the risk, quantify the risk, manage it for better organizational sustainability. Environmental risks are receiving more attention from the investors and consumers as the people become more conscious of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, resource usage, and biodiversity protection. So, there are few examples of environmental risk. Go through it once. Same as social risk and governance risk. Governance is the culture, value, mission, structure, layers of policies, process, and measures by which organizations are directed and controlled. Risks associated with governance include corporate morals and ethics, conduct and practices that are anti-competitive, ESG regulations, compliance, ESG transparency, open communication, grievance policies and processes, preventing fraud and corruption, compensation for executives, diversity of the board of directors, corruption and extortion, standards and regulations, paying taxes, and managing the ESG risk. ESG risk management. ESG is a specialized aspect of risk management, although having a broad range of potential applications. ESG assurance is a less intimidating than you may think if you take a sound strategy and use the right tools, just as in every other area of risk management. ESG risk management is essential for identifying, managing, and reducing all associated risk. When evaluating the ESG risk, there is no universal strategy. Next, climate risk. There are 6 steps for climate risk management. First, assess and match information needs with the risk management objectives, define system of interest, develop context-specific methodology, risk identification to identify low and high level of climate-related risk, and risk evaluation to identify acceptable, tolerable, and intolerable risk, assessment of risk management options. Next, business continuity plan. A business continuity plan is a document that outlines how a business will continue operating during an unplanned disruption in the service. It is a system of prevention and recovery from potential threat to the company. BCP can be tailored to specific departments such as finance, HR, and marketing operations. With respect to finance operation, BCP focus on maintaining financial system and process. For HR, BCP would focus on maintaining personal resources and ensuring that the company is able to continue pay its employees and provide benefits. For marketing, BCP would focus on maintaining the marketing systems and process, ensuring that the company is able to continue to promote its products and services and maintaining the company's image and reputation. Next, the components of business continuity are strategy, organization, application and data, process, technology, facilities. So, strategy, organization, application and data, processes, technology and facilities. Steps to create a BCP. First, assemble a business continuity management team and create a contact list. Provide a detailed overview of the roles and responsibility. Have a process in place for how BCP will be updated. This team will prepare standards for the project and train additional team members. Ensure the safety and well-being of employees. So, company has to prioritize the safety of employees while formulating the plan for BCP, and support a safe working environment, and should have a proper communication channel in place to get in touch with all the employees at the same time. Third, understanding the risk to your company. Once business continuity management team is assembled, you must conduct a business impact analysis. This type of analysis will help you identify specific threat to a financial performance, operations, supply chain, reputation, employees. It can serve as a starting point when identifying the risk. You and your team should brainstorm a list of threat and potential risk to your business. Then decide how risk mentioned above could be affect business operations. Fourth and last, fifth is there, but fourth, implement recover strategy. Once a disaster occurs and financial losses begin to grow, it can be challenging to get back on track without a BCP in place. Consider the following questions as you discuss options with your team. First, do you have way to get sales, HR, manufacturing, and support personnel back to work after the disaster to continue operating your business? How will you continue to meet the continue to meet the demand for product or services if your equipment or facility is damaged? If your facilities are impacted, will your employees work remotely at home or from an alternative location? And the last is test again and make improvements. Next, crisis management plan. Process of handling and reacting to a sudden unexpected occurrence that poses a serious threat to an organization is known as crisis management. A crisis management plan is a specific type of BCP that focuses on procedures and protocols for dealing with a crisis such as public relation crisis or a safety emergency. Need for the crisis management. Crisis management prepares the individual to face unexpected developments and adverse conditions in the organization with courage and determination. Employees adjust well to the sudden change in the organization. Employees can understand and analyze the causes of crisis and cope with it in the best possible way. Crisis management help the managers to devise strategies to come out of uncertain conditions and also decide on the future course of action. Crisis management helps the managers to feel the early signs of crisis, warn the employees against the aftermath, and take necessary precautions for the same. Means need for crisis management is majorly related to people of the organization, employees, managers, and all. Next, essential features of the crisis management plan. Crisis management includes activities and processes which help the managers as well as employees to analyze and understand events which might lead to crisis and uncertainty in the organization. Next, crisis management enables the managers and employees to respond effectively. It consists of effective coordination amongst the department to overcome emergency situation. Employees at the time of the crisis must communicate effectively with each other and try their level to overcome tough time. How can such conflicts between management and board be avoided? At least 3/4 of the board members should be independent. The board should have an independent chairman and not an individual who serves the role of both CEO and chairman of the board. Means separation of the power between CEO and chairman. Annual board election should be conducted as this force directors to make more careful decisions and more attentive to shareholders because they can cast the vote to keep or eliminate a director each year. Also, every year, board self-assessment practices should have been conducted and also cover a case study of any listed company in BSE or NSE. Next, disaster recovery plan. Disaster recovery plan is a plan that outlines the procedures and strategies that a corporation will use to restore its critical operations and services in the event of disaster. The goal of a DRP is to ensure that the corporation can quickly and effectively recover from a disaster and return to normal operations. Next, elements of disaster recovery plan. First, create a disaster recovery team. Identify and assess the disaster risk. Determine critical applications, documents, and resources. Specify backup and offset storage procedures. Test and maintain the DRP. Cyber risk management. Cyber security risk management process. Provide a genesis of cyber risk management and then cover the points which mentioned below. First, identify the risk that might comprise cyber security. Analyze the severity of each risk by assessing how likely it is to occur and how significant the impact might be. Evaluate how each risk fit within your risk appetite. Prioritize the risk. Decide how to respond to each risk. There are generally 4 options: treat, tolerate, terminate, transfer. Treat, tolerate, terminate, transfer. Cyber security measures: legal, technical, organizational, capacity, and cooperation measures. So 5: legal, technical, organizational, capacity, and cooperation. Done. Chapter 18.